The central Buddhist concept of anatta, or no self. I have a physical form. I identify with it. Nevertheless, if I were to lose an arm or have my organs replaced, or even enter another person's body, would I still consider myself to be that person? Is there still a sense of self if we consider the fact that this body is composed of cells rather than atoms? Let's learn the answer today. This video is about the central Buddhist concept of anatta, or no self, and it contains some of the most profound and challenging material the religion has to offer. Thus, I trust you will remain in a state of calm and concentration throughout. You won't be let down. This video has the power to alter your outlook on life and make you a contented human being at every stage of your development, from infancy to old age. Hello and welcome to today's video, where we're going to discuss about the topic, the central Buddhist concept of anatta, or no self. But before we dive into that, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever I upload a new video. And if you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Let's delve in. Because we all have to die sometime. We believe that an unseen force may influence our decisions even after we're dead. Some refer to this intangible being as a soul. Ego is what we name it, since we believe that there is only one ego in each of us, and that it does not evolve through time. Others refer to it as awareness. Ego attachment is the Buddhist term for this constant state of being. Ego love originates from an excessive fondness for the ego, which manifests as a desire to pamper and protect the ego at all costs. Since we all eventually die, it's natural to worry about our own mortality, and as a result, many of us are prepared to sell our decency and morality for the temporary relief of our egos. We must first make a distinction between altruism and transience, because we can see our own transformation and change from moment to moment. We know that we are temporary. Birth, aging, illness, and death are inevitable facts of life, and if we claim to be selfless, we must examine these experiences through the lens of dependent origination. Many different worldviews have discussed the concept of impermanence, including but not limited to those that emphasize the interconnectedness of cause and effect, the synthesis of interpersonal connections, and the need of effort and development in reaching full maturity. Water flow diarrhea. Thanks to the great philosopher Hagrid said, "No one should bathe in the same river twice, because stepping into the same river often encounters new streams of water." Confucius wrote fake verses like the idea of not letting go and threatening. The meaning is to flow continuously day and night like this, both in grapes and in Western philosophy. Although the concept of impermanence is present in all things, there does not seem to be any concept of selflessness, suggesting that the Buddha's theory of non-self is a very big revolutionary teaching, presented in the second discourse in this garden. The physical body, which constitutes this shape, is not self. Why, if there is a self in form, does it not have to endure pain? And why can we direct the form to take on whatever appearance we want if it does not exist? Since there is no I to direct this body to be this way or that, there is no way to prevent this form from suffering. Sensation, perception, and behavior, all mental states, make up the remaining sources, feeling. Sentient organisms may readily give birth to a mind because of the philosophical and psychological outlook of awareness, which is identical to all five causes that establish a mistaken sense of a self or an unchanging uniform being. Lack of critical deliberation in conduct towards the selfless truth of all things, such as indulging in greed, holding cautiously, and hanging closely to what belongs to the five aggregates, is typically the route that leads to those fatal calamities. Selflessness is a dharma seal unique to Buddhism, which holds that there is no self, nothing eternal, unchanging, solid, existing independently of the meaning that things exist due dependent arising arises. Before things have no right to their own birth and destruction. This view is what causes suffering. Since the five aggregates are in a constant state of flux, arising and passing away, the ego is a non-existent construct in Buddhism, belongs to the trio of dharma seals. Suffering and transience are the other two dharma seals. Anything that begins must eventually end, is temporary. The pain we endure is fleeting. No amount of willpower can prevent the cyclical nature of suffering that occurs at birth. All the dharmas of existence are based on altruism. The dharma that is born and dies is the dharma of suffering. The three dharma seals of impermanence and suffering are clearly seen when one sees the actual nature of one's own mental and bodily actions. As long as all human cognition is tethered to the concepts of the ego's perpetual abode and the erroneous way of grasping, the three dharma seals will remain in effect. The scientific community has also confirmed the truth of altruism. For instance, although human brain has billions of cells, there is no bad cell that orders them to gossip about each other until a thought emerges. The human brain, according to neuroscientists, is like an orchestra in which each member plays a different instrument without any shared harmonic background. None of the trillions of cells that make up our body can lay claim to being our uncle. We believe that getting out of samsara and into nirvana requires the existence of a self who can free themselves from the cycle of suffering, samsara, if there is no I to free. When a person has no ego, they are able to see the Buddha Dharma, hear the teachings, put them into practice, generate karma, and experience its consequences. It's possible for everyone to experience bewilderment and misinterpretation when exposed to the philosophy of selflessness. Remember, Buddhists, the Buddha never told us to deny the reality of the ego. When we say things like, I am talking or walking or eating or watching this video, so how can we deny the reality of the ego? The Buddha himself had to use a certain word to address him, like the word Tathagata, for example. And no matter what this word means, it is still a word or a title, since an autonomous, permanent, unchanging, and eternal being is required for the concept of self to make sense. The Buddha's denial involves abandoning the idea that such an entity exists. You won't find anybody or anything like that anyplace. So many of the Buddha's core beliefs about the cosmos and human existence were flipped on its heads with the introduction of the notion of non-self. In his teachings, the Buddha dealt a devastating blow to the dominant and most secure view of mankind at the time. The notion of the ego's existence was supplied in return for the idea of the self, not as a replacement for the self. Because altruism is a strategy, not an objective. If it becomes an idea, it must be shattered just like any other concept is. Except for the Dharma without self, because without us there is no way to exercise self-control. There are three distinct kinds of not-self that we can identify: the spirit of selflessness, the thought of grasping the self, and the state of egolessness. Without mastery of illusion, even the Zen master cannot ensure that it will remain eternally youthful and healthy, can only remain within the body for a limited duration. Second, the perspective of altruism demonstrates that incorrect beliefs held by sentient humans are not sacrosanct, just like greedy thoughts, happy thoughts, sad thoughts, and angry thoughts. The concept of a second true battle does not exist. Finally, the scene of egolessness is the world around us, which is always shifting and changing as events like as the demolition of cities, fluctuating prices, the abandonment of oil fields, and the transformation of land into seas prevail. Buddha used the following reasoning to show that neither God nor the mind discussing God are where the self can be found. If the body is the self, then the ego must be permanent, unchanging, non-fading, non-destructive, and non-dead. However, the body is frail, weary, and old. And, contrary to our desires, the body's outward appearance is often not followed according to our own desires. The ego is not spiritual and hence cannot have a physical form. The ego is not in the dew, the blood, or the marrow. We may explore the body from head to toe and not locate it. Anywhere we speak about the mind is not the self because it is like ideas. In hair or saliva, the self is not to be found in the spirit. The self is not in the body if the body is in the self, in the body and mind. The self is not found together. Even though we know that some thoughts are wholesome and some are unwholesome, the mind keeps following unwholesome practices and is cold towards good thoughts. So the ego need not fear the mind because the mind acts cynically and is constantly engaged in a variety of activities, like an ape, which means that the mind is not the self. The ego exists outside of thought. That's all there is to it so long as we're bound to the ego. Once we let rid of the concept in an independent and permanent ego, we may live with anybody calmly, but we still need to guard ourselves. Our riches, our property, our status, our position, and even our words. Because I equate prosperity with ignorance. And ignorance is one of the three basic afflictions: anger, ignorance, and clinging to the self. The Buddha taught that realizing non-self is the key to reaching great enlightenment. Or even just consider the possibility that we quickly establish a barrier between ourselves and the world. The ability to respond to the world around us depends on the development of a sense of self. Self-denial is the key to ending suffering and cerebral palsy. But it is also the key to entering Mahabodhi, the state of perfect enlightenment, where the practitioner ceases to think about himself and becomes completely selfless. By keeping a close eye on the practitioner's motions and perceiving them carefully, the three traits may be deduced. All existences will be created and annihilated by these actions and ideas. There, we may completely grasp the absence of selflessness in all existences. By realizing the transience, pain, and egolessness of all occurrences in existence. Let's assume for a moment that we have to reflect on the fact that everything in this world is subject to change at all times. This is the moment of impermanence. Mountains, rivers, and political systems all move through cycles much like everything else in the earth. To prevent the delusion of the remoteness of things and the effects of mistakes, it is important to routinely recognize the impermanence of all things, which involves observing the time of birth, existence, and destruction known as the one period of impermanence. According to Buddha's teachings, the five aggregates consist of substance, emotions, thoughts, deeds, and cognition, and are coupled with the masculine element because of this. The four classical elements are empty and lifeless, thus matter can't be either. A person made up of the five aggregates does not have an everlasting self or a fixed subject. Seeing the five aggregates requires recognizing the transient character of human beings, and the fleeting nature of the natural world. If he had no sense of self, no birth, no change, no master, no control, then this once beautiful tail feathers would have been drenched. He was afraid of hurting his tail if he took to the air, and decided it was better to be captured than to respond. They are easy prey for peacock hunters because the peacock's dread of losing its gorgeous tail feathers makes it a sitting duck. The wolf is protecting its leg by detaching it from its body. Your whole existence will teach you that the physical form created by the four great elements is not where your true home is. You will suffer the same repercussions as the wolf if you become more and more preoccupied with your personal attractiveness. Hundreds of monks, after hearing the Buddha's teachings on impermanence and non-self, made the decision to give up at the correct moment in order to save life. The most important thing, and so should you, a surrender of connection to bodily form, rather than a rejection of the means by which one attempts to terminate one's life, is at issue here. You shouldn't adore your boat, but you should praise the boat, and bring it with you on the long voyage. You'll need it to cross the river, so you may as well get some experience rowing it before you need it. The remainder doesn't add anything at all. Just what is it that you consider to be the root of all evil? In his 45 years of spreading the Dharma, the Buddha reiterated his precise teachings hundreds of times, because he knew how crucial it was that his disciples put into practice the theory of non-attachment. What is not mine, what is not me, what is not myself is what has to be considered with right wisdom. So listen up, monk. What is impermanent? What is impermanent? What is suffering? What pain is not self? What is not self? Contemplation as it really is with right wisdom releases the mind from greed without making it cling to other vices. It's not easy to figure out how to practice non-self in a manner that takes into account all aspects of reality, including one's own sense of identity. Since most individuals, when faced with the challenge of not clinging to themselves, end up clinging even more, the Buddha's way of non-self is one that few people are able to practice. The reason for this is because many individuals incorrectly apply it. What would happen if you constantly tell yourself that you must desist from being attached to or concerned with oneself in any manner, shape, or form? The problem with such kind of thought is that it leads to unhealthy levels of self-absorption. According to the theory known as the law of attraction, Our thoughts and words have a multiplicative effect on our lives. The more we think about, talk about, and feel about something, the more of it we bring into our lives. Like the law of attraction, where the central focus is fat. Praying for better language is pointless since it would be equivalent to speaking to everyone by name. The best way to get your mind off of me while you're enjoying yourself is to focus on someone else. Make an effort to learn so that you may one day serve your nation. If you want to become smart, you should study in another country. Our nation, we say, would do well to devote more resources to helping the needy in the years to come. When we concentrate on other people in this way, we develop an egoless mind. And the law of attraction draws more like-minded people to us. And your way of thinking encourages you to have a greater capacity for love and altruism. Putting other people in the country ahead of yourself is a simple but effective way to become more unselfish. Understanding the vast network that leads to the interdependence of sentient beings and the world we live in other words, the more clearly and closely one understands the laws and orders of our fellow human beings, the more we will respect each other's laws and orders, and the more we will respect the truth that there is no self. The importance of political and economic education in constructing a peaceful society, and how to take charge of ecosystems. If you find this video challenging, watch it again and think carefully about what I share. If you do understand, watch it again and think carefully about what I share. And if you still don't understand, watch it again and think carefully about what I share. Because according to the theory of Yan, we will play an active role for building a world in which we all want to live. I pray you find a way to overcome your inner turmoil and start enjoying life again soon. You're welcome for viewing. The video is over. So long for now. In the next video content.